everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, this is going to be the first of a three-part video series based on this article from the April 1979 Ensign called Missouri Myths. It's by Graham W. Doxey. It says here, Graham W. Doxey, former president of the Missouri Independence Mission, serves as first counselor in the general presidency of the Young Men. So this is back in the 70s, right? He's not that right now, but he had that position. He's a general authority. And I want to do this again because I already did one video where we read through the entire thing, but I felt like it'd probably be worth it to go over it again. Just because from time to time I see comments and people talking about these Missouri myths, which according to the church, they're not true. And you can find this on the church website. Again, I'm on the church website. This is the Ensign of 1979 April edition. Okay. And keep in mind about the Ensign, I really like things that show up in the Ensign because I feel like they're very credible. And the reason why I feel that is because every single Ensign, you have an article in there that's either by a member of the First Presidency or one of the Quorum of the 12. And you know that these aren't just like, articles that just show up in the Ensign and nobody knows about it. In this particular issue, we had President Spencer W. Kimball that had an article in here, along with other general authorities, including Bruce R. McConkie and others. So it's not like, things that aren't right just like slip into the Ensign without notice. And I'm pretty sure that all the general authorities read the current issue of the Ensign. Maybe they don't read every single one, but between all of them, I'm pretty sure that it's read. So I don't think that there's going to be anything that shows up in the Ensign that's not correct. And this particular article itself being written by a general authority. So I give a lot of credibility to what was the Ensign. It is now the Liahona, at least in English. For some reason, there was like both the Liahona and the Ensign running side by side up until just recently. Now it's just the Liahona, but whatever. So there's three myths here, and I'm actually going to focus on number 2 first because as I was pulling up information and stuff, it lined up more with myth number 2, but I will do number 1 and 3. Let me just read the myths really quick, just to give you a preview. Myth number 1, we're going to walk to Missouri to prepare for the second coming. Myth number 2, this is the one that we're doing today. The entire church will be gathered to Missouri. I hear this like all the time. All the time. But no, it's a myth. Myth number 3, but won't there be immense destructions in Missouri preceding the second coming, so extensive that, quote, not a yellow dog will be left to wag his tail, end quote. Okay, so those are the 3 myths that we're going to cover, starting with number 2. We'll start up here. Okay, let me close out of this. We'll start up here with the beginning of the article. It says, Missouri from the time of the settlement of Adamandayaman has been a place dear to the saints' hearts, a place important in our history and important in our future. But its vivid and turbulent history has produced myths that sometimes parallel the prophecies of its future until it is difficult to untangle what the Lord has told us from, quote-unquote, things we've heard all our lives, end quote. For instance, and it starts with myth number 1. We're going to skip down to myth number 2. Now, you guys, I've heard all these things as well. I've been a member my entire life. Was born in the covenant, and so I've heard these things from uncles and people in my ward, like young men's leaders and stuff like that. And so, I'm sure everyone that's been in the church for a while, they're familiar with these things. And so let's just go ahead and start it. So myth number 2, the entire church will be gathered to Missouri. So meaning saints from Japan, Africa, Ukraine, Russia, Europe, everywhere, in preparation for the second coming, they will all come to Missouri. I saw one person that said that, the section in the Doctrine and Covenants that talks about the destroyer upon the waters. He was saying, well, I think he or she, I can't remember, said that, well, yeah, only in those days will the saints be able to safely cross the waters so that they can get to Missouri, while everybody else will be destroyed that tries to do naval navigation, basically. Which I do not accept at all. I don't believe that that's true. But anyway, let's read what it says here. Here, recent prophets have been quite specific. President Spencer W. Kimball said in an October conference, 1978. So this was, at the time that this was written, it was just the year before, just 6 months before. Quote, "We are building up the strength of Zion, her cords or stakes, throughout the world. Therefore, we counsel our people to remain in their native lands and gather out the elect of God and teach them the ways of the Lord. Their temples are being built, and the saints will be blessed wherever they live in all the world." During the time of Joseph Smith and Brigham Young, it was essential for members of the church to, quote-unquote, gather to Zion for their own spiritual and physical safety. But now that temples, welfare projects, educational facilities, genealogical research libraries, and the blessings of a full church organization in stakes are available, this gathering is no longer required or wise. Okay, I think what happens, you guys, is I've said this before on the channel, a lot of times when we read the scriptures, we think that every single thing is specifically for us during right now. It's all talking about us. It's all something that we're supposed to witness. We disregard the context of the scriptures. We just went over, for example, 2 Thessalonians, which a lot of people think has to do with the last days, and it doesn't. It has to do with the time immediately after the time of the apostles. Okay, the beginning of the great apostasy. Now, there are things that we can learn and apply to ourselves from different things, but we have to understand the context. That's why the church, when you go to the Doctrine and Covenants, for example, not only do you have the summary of the section, but you also have like this chapter heading that explains the historical background, and they've updated it over the years, and they do that for a reason. It's so that you can understand the context in which these revelations are being given, so that you don't mistakenly think, oh, this still applies today, or when it's like something that is specifically for that time. And I think there's some people that don't get that. They just open up the scriptures, they disregard that. They're like, oh yeah, that's nice, and then they think, oh wow, okay, so the entire church is going to go to Missouri because I read it right here. Not understanding the context and maybe not even reading it correctly. So let's continue on. Let's see. And although the church purchased some Clay County land last December, it was solely for investment purposes, not for other church use. At a general conference, President Harold B. Lee, so he's quoting from two prophets. First he quoted from Spencer W. Kimball, and now Harold B. Lee. So anyway, at a general conference, President Harold B. Lee stressed the point made by Elder Bruce R. McConkie at the Mexico City area conference. And we're actually going to read from this exact talk in just a minute. But Bruce R. McConkie told them, quote, "The place of gathering for the Mexican saints is in Mexico, and so it goes through the length and breadth of the whole earth. Japan is for the Japanese, Korea is for the Koreans, Australia is for the Australians. Every nation is the gathering place for its own people." I just want to point something out, okay? So let's look at a world map. In fact, I already have this pulled up. We'll come back to that spot in just a minute. You look at the entire world, right? Let's go to the political map. There we go. So even before this dispensation, it was critical that you stay within a certain geographic area of where it wasn't like even so. There wasn't even like so much. It wasn't so much about countries as it was your people. Okay, that's how far back we're going when we're talking about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and how they made sure that they married people that were familiar with the Lord instead of marrying people of the land that were engaged in pagan practices and false gods, right? So if you were back in Old Testament times, you couldn't just go over here to Algeria. Not that Algeria was a country back then, but I'm just saying, you couldn't come over here, to Africa. You couldn't go over here. You did so at your own spiritual peril, because if you wanted to make covenants, if you wanted to be part of the covenant people, you basically couldn't really do it very easily. The size of the people or the church, or however you want to think of it, was very, very, very small and very, very confined to this area right here. And then when Israel came back, they became a nation, so it was a little bit easier to kind of spread out a little bit. But as we're studying the Jewish feast days, for example, a lot of the biblical um, feast days, when all of them were being observed the way that they were supposed to during Bible times, there were several of them where everyone in Israel had to come to the temple. They had to come over here. So if you lived up here, by the Sea of Galilee, or you lived down here, in this like Sinai kind of area, you had to go up here. One of the times was for first fruits. If you were a farmer, you had to come to Jerusalem to offer the first fruits. That's where the temple was. So think about how the temple is really what kind of pins it all down. It's the temple. It's the temple. So in our dispensation, we come over here, and the first temple is built over here in the suburbs of Cleveland, essentially, in Kirtland, Ohio. Where is it? Where's There it is. Kirtland, Ohio. Right? So it was the same kind of situation in the early days of the church. You couldn't just come and go live in West Virginia or Tennessee or even Kansas, right? You had to be, if you were going to be a member of the church, you had to be where the church was. Otherwise, you were going to be alone, unless you had a big enough community that followed you. So as the Doctrine and Covenants was being written, and revelations were being given, the command at that time was to come be with the saints. You couldn't just stay where you were. There wasn't enough organization, enough membership, enough logistical solutions to administer a church worldwide at that point. And so at one point, the command was to come over here to Missouri, and this was the planned site for New Jerusalem, and it still is, but it's not the time yet, right? But in the Doctrine and Covenants, it was like, yes, everyone come over here, right? And the plan was to build a temple. We had the Kirtland Temple. That was a gathering spot, but then we had to leave there. And then since we couldn't stay in Missouri, we had to go up to Nauvoo, Illinois, which I think is over here somewhere. Where is it? Here it is. Nauvoo, and then built a temple, and that was the gathering place. And then after that, because we couldn't stay there, we had to cross the plains over here like this, and then end up in, up like this, and then down like this, and then gather in Salt Lake. But then as time progressed, it was no longer necessary because the church population grew, more and more temples were constructed, starting in St. George, right? That was actually the first one built after the Nauvoo Temple. And then later we had Logan, Salt Lake, Manti temples that were built, right? So the church was able to spread. And it's interesting because this was the only time that we really know of where you had multiple temples in operation. Well, other than Book of Mormon times, because I guess you could say, going back to the Bible, you would have had, once the Jews returned from the Babylonian destruction and exile, they built the second temple, and at that same time, in the Western Hemisphere, there were Nephite temples. I think there were multiple temples. I'm not sure. I know that there was at least one in. Well, yeah, there was multiple temples. Anyway, But since that time, this was the first time in Utah that the world ever had multiple temples, right? So you can think of it as like multiple gathering places, in addition to stakes, right? Temples and stakes, gathering places. So let's go back here. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now that we have, sorry, now I need to pull up this website. LDS Temple Map. I really like this website, churchofjesuschristtemples.org. This is a really well put together website. It's been around for a while. Now you can see all the different gathering places, right? Of course, this doesn't show all the stakes, because really the stake is like a gathering place, but all stakes are included in temple districts, and so it's like the same thing. So now we have a really, really unprecedented situation where temples are all over the world. It's not just right here in Jerusalem, or maybe a few over here in the Americas. Now they're all over. They're on every continent. So when John the Revelator, using symbolic language, talking about the work of calling election made sure and bringing people into the church of the firstborn and stuff like that, when he was saying that, when he was talking about the 144,000, or when he was talking about the dimensions of New Jerusalem, again, those numbers are symbolic based on what we've read, right? And so you would say like 12 is the number for priesthood. And so you take 12 times 12, that's 144, and then you times it by 1,000. And 1,000 had a meaning to them, just meaning, wow, great, grand, incredible, better than just 10, 1,000. So it's like saying, you guys, this is like what John was basically saying. You guys, if you could just see the future, if you could see the last days, it is going to be priesthood times whoa! That's what he was saying by that. And the same thing with New Jerusalem. Look at all the land of New Jerusalem right now. Okay, look at the United States, in Canada, in Mexico. I guess you could include that, or the entire both continents. Look how many temples are there. As you're talking about New Jerusalem, and it's like, again, it's like, you guys, New Jerusalem in the new days, the temple, it's going to be 12 times 12 times, whoa! That's what's going on, because back in his day, it was only here, just in Jerusalem, nowhere else in the entire world. Now it's all over the place. It's a miracle. If other people from those days could see our days and see temples all over the world outside of Jerusalem with so many members of the church, it would blow their minds. It would blow their minds. Okay, continuing on. Of course, there will be special functions of the temple in Jackson County, but worldwide gatherings of the saints to Missouri may not be necessary or desired. After all, the mission of members is to always share the gospel with the non-members who surround them throughout the world, and this activity will undoubtedly continue after the second coming. Yeah, we've talked about that a number of times, even recently, how missionary work is going to continue, at least in the beginning of the millennium, until eventually either everyone dies off or is converted, and then everyone will be part of the church. Elder Harold B. Lee further cautioned the saints in all lands to be guided by the current prophet, not by rumor or supposition, and, quote, look forward to the instruction that shall come to them from the first presidency of this church as to where they shall be gathered, and not be disturbed in their feelings until such instruction is given to them as it is revealed by the Lord to the proper authority, end quote. Okay, so we do know that, this comes up from time to time on the channel, whether Salt Lake is the New Jerusalem, or if there's going to be, if there really will be New Jerusalem in Missouri. And I come across time and time again church material supporting the idea of Independence, Jackson County still being the center place of New Jerusalem, and where the millennial temple will be built, right? supported by what we just read here. It was talking about, yes, there's still gonna be the temple. It's still gonna be a special place, but not necessarily a place where everyone is from the entire world is gonna gather to, right? Um, there's other places you can go to that supports this. You go to the guide to the scriptures. It says the gathering place for saints in the last days. That is the center place where they will establish New Jerusalem, Missouri, Jackson County, Missouri, USA. You come over here to this. It's called, this is on the church website too, questions and answers about the temple lot in Independence, Missouri. You read about just the different things here, and then at the very bottom it says, why is the temple lot significant today? Answer. To answer this question, we return to words of Revelation. Quote, this is the land of promise, the Lord declared, in the place of the city of Zion. The place which is now called Independence is the center place, and a spot from the temple for the temple is lying westward. That's from DNC 57, 2-3. We do not know exactly how, when, or where these words will be fulfilled, but we do know that that rectangle of land in Independence is sacred. It has been dedicated to the Lord. The Lord's revelations about that land and the principles of gospel living that are woven into those revelations are part of his people's past, present, and future. So, excuse me, here's kind of a map, an overhead view of right here, where it says temple lot. That was the original place that was dedicated for a temple, but it is now owned by the Church of Christ. Temple lot, we have our visitor center right here. And if you'll remember, I did a video talking about if the Lord gave revelation and said, okay, we're not gonna do a temple in that original spot. It's going to be moved to the land that the church currently owns. It could be done, because when you look at this article, and we've done this before a couple times, it has the original plans for the city of Zion. Here's like the first version, but then it was expanded to be a lot bigger, and you have this 24 temple complex right here. You see in the very middle here, you have a row of a column of 3, and then a row of 8 for 24. This is the 24 temple complex that was planned, and the first temple, its area, or where it was supposed to be, it was already dedicated by Joseph Smith, like the cornerstone and all that stuff. However, since it now belongs to the Church of Christ temple lot, what I was talking about in this video is, we know that the Independence Visitor Center was made to be in the same dimensions as those original temples, what they would have been. Okay, so like the area, the length and the width. That's what, and they consulted with David O. McKay. Alvin R. Dyer was over the lands of Missouri at that time, and they worked with the architect to make it so that it could become in the future part of the complex. And so the church currently owns this land right here, this big area. So all that would need to happen, okay, is for the Lord to give a commandment or a revelation to President Nelson or whoever the president is at the time, and there's enough land to do that 24 temple complex. I did this with Photoshop. Let's go back here to this. We'll go back to the satellite. You see this land right here? All you would have to do is get rid of the stake center, get rid of this parking lot, and then you could make a complex right here without disturbing these other churches, the Community of Christ or the Church of Christ temple lot. Not saying that that's going to happen. I'm just showing you that it's possible if the Lord revealed it, which he may or may not. Okay. So anyway, over here, this is the New Era magazine, May 2005. It confirms, it says, it is the place where the Lord Jesus Christ will return again to New Jerusalem, talking about Jackson County, Missouri. So I firmly believe that it is going to be the place of New Jerusalem, although I've argued that Salt Lake City is currently acting as the New Jerusalem. That's my own opinion. I'm not saying that that's the fact, but if there was currently a New Jerusalem, it would be Salt Lake City, right? That's where the headquarters of the church is right now. I don't see any problem with Christ coming to Salt Lake, to the Salt Lake Temple, before the second coming. You know, when we're talking about him coming to New Jerusalem, it's just like how you have the acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, right? He's acting in place of somebody that's in the first presidency. I think the same concept could apply to Salt Lake City being the acting area of New Jerusalem until such a time, maybe during the millennium, that New Jerusalem is moved here and built up. Okay, so now let's read from this talk. This is by President Harold B. Lee. We already read some of it. This is from April 1973 General Conference. The name of the talk is Strengthen the Stakes of Zion. He says, this is the annual conference of the church. April 6th, 1973 is a particularly significant date because it commemorates not only the anniversary of the organization of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in this dispensation, but also the anniversary of the birth of the Savior, our Lord and Master Jesus Christ. So this is interesting because this is something that I didn't know for sure if this was like the official position of the church, but here we have a prophet saying in General Conference, and I haven't heard anything that says that this position has changed. He's saying that that's the birth date of Christ. Now, I'm gonna accept that. So I guess on the solar Gregorian calendar, you could say that April 6th is his birthday. I don't know what it would be on the Hebrew calendar, but anyway, make of that what you will. But he says here in General Conference that it is the birthday of Christ, April 6th. And then he quotes D&C 20 verse 1, quote, the rise of the Church of Christ in these last days, being 1,830 years since the coming of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ in the flesh, it being regularly organized and established agreeable to the laws of our country by the will and commandments of God in the 4th month on the 6th day of the month which is called April. Later, he quotes D&C 82:14, for Zion must increase in beauty and in holiness, her borders must be enlarged, her stakes must be strengthened. Yea, verily I say unto you, Zion must arise and put on her beautiful garments. Think about temple clothing. Zion, as used here, undoubtedly had reference to the church. At the time, there was but a small body of the church members just beginning to emerge as an organization, after having experienced harsh treatment from enemies outside the church, who had then been directed to gather together in Jackson County, Missouri, which the Lord had designated as, quote, land of Zion. Okay, later he says, while the church was in its infancy, the Lord pointed to a time when those earlier gathering places would not have room for all who would be gathered, for reasons of which he declared that his church should be united. Here is his words, quote, for thus shall my church be called in the last days, even the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, end quote. And then this command, quote, arise and shine forth, that thy light may be a standard for the nations, end quote. That's D&C 115, 4-5. In these revelations, the Lord speaks of organized units of the church, which are designated as stakes. Excuse me. Each of which those not of our faith may think of as a diocese. These units, so organized, are gathered together for these fundamental purposes. First, for defense against the enemies of the Lord's work, both the seen and the unseen. And then down here, he quotes what we just read from Bruce R. McConkie, but I'm going to read it again. At the Mexico City Area Conference last August, Elder Bruce R. McConkie of the Council of the 12, in a thought-provoking address, made some comments pertinent to this subject, and I quote a few sentences from his address. Quote, "Of this glorious day of restoration and gathering, another Nephite prophet said, quote, the Lord has covenanted with all the house of Israel, that the time comes that they shall be restored to the true church and fold of God, and that they shall be gathered home to the lands of their inheritance, and shall be established in their lands of promise." 2 Nephi chapter 9 verses 1 through 2. Now I call your attention to the facts set forth in these scriptures, that the gathering of Israel consists of joining the true church, of coming to a knowledge of the true God and of his saving truths, and of worshiping him in the congregations of the saints in all nations and among all peoples. Please note that these revealed words speak of the folds of the Lord. So not just like one fold, but many folds of the Lord. Of Israel being gathered to the lands of their inheritance, of Israel being established in all their lands of promise. So in all their lands of promise, and of there being congregations of covenant people of the Lord in every nation, speaking every tongue, and among every people when the Lord comes again. Elder McConkie then concluded with this statement, which certainly emphasizes the great need for the teaching and training of local leadership in order to build up the church within their own native countries. Quote, "The place of gathering for the Mexican saints is in Mexico. The place of gathering for the Guatemalan saints is in Guatemala. The place for gathering for Brazilian saints is in Brazil. And so it goes through the length and breadth of the whole world. Japan is for the Japanese, Korea is for the Koreans, Australia is for the Australians. Every nation is the gathering place for its own people." Okay, so that's it for this one. So that was myth number 2. Again, the myth was that the entire church will be gathered to Missouri. This is not true. It's not true. It's not true according to Spencer W. Kimball, Harold B. Lee, Bruce R. McConkie. It's being repeated again by Graham W. Doxey. So anyway, there you have it. Next time, I think we'll go over myth number 1. We're going to walk to Missouri to prepare for the second coming. I guess that kind of already gets cleared up with what we just reviewed in myth number 2. And then after that, we'll do myth number 3. But won't there be immense destructions in Missouri preceding the second coming, so extensive that, quote, "not a yellow dog will be left to wag his tail," end quote. So, hope you enjoyed this. Hope you learned something new. I think that this is all very good information. As with every other video, I always put the references down in the description so you can go see it for yourself and maybe do further study if you feel like it. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it. Leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it with anyone that just doesn't know about these things, that still repeat these myths. I think that these myths need to be put to bed. And I'll talk to you guys later.